Hello everybody. Today we're going to build on our foam core skills. And in our last video we looked at using foam core and seeing that we can pin it together to get a nice smooth edge, recognizing that not all foam cores are made the same. This is dollar store foam core and this is artist grade foam core. So many times when you're using this cheaper foam core, if you're just using it as a structure like a skeleton, you'll get really rough edges like this. Now you can finish those rough edges, as I did with this hinged and footed box, by just using masking tape or even duct tape, some kind of tape to hold it together, and you can get some pretty decent clean lines for at least a prototype. But often, you don't have black tape that goes well with it. Maybe your foam core got a little bit dinged up as you were working on it. Maybe you had a corner that you had to fix. Well, at that point, it's really great for something like this to start looking, for instance, like this, where you have really clean edges where it comes together. It's still strong foam core. There are no air bubbles in it. This is bonded to the foam core so tightly that it won't come off. So I don't need tape. I don't have bulky edges. I can pin through it if I want, but actually you'll see that I will often pin the design to hold it together as one step, construct it, finish the construction, and then construct the skin separately. So sometimes I'll be showing you how to do skins while you're in process, but it's really worth it to figure out whether your skin should go on, while you're making it, or do it as a wrap afterwards. Now, I do have some glues that are very important. I'm going to use rubber cement, and this is just plain old rubber cement you can get at pretty much any store that sells, even office supplies will have this. Sometimes you'll find it in a drugstore. And you want this one with the brush because it'll ruin the brush. Well ventilated place because it smells. I would not use Elmer's glue. Now, when I'm talking about Elmer's glue versus rubber cement, as you probably know, you get like air bubbles with this. Sometimes it buckles later because it's pretty wet. This air dries. This stays wet for a while, and so it's pretty hard to get a really smooth glue on your paper. You can't really water it down because it makes the paper buckle even more. And the other alternative is like this, spread it really thin with a brush, but the problem is this will dry out before you can finish putting the glue on it and get it on your box. This, and you have to hurry up, not good in design. This allows you to let it completely dry before you even put it together, so you can go assembly line and, like put the glue adhesive strip on 6 pieces instead of one at a time screwing it up. So don't use that. The other thing that works about as well as this is wallpaper paste, which is basically wheat paste. Wheat paste, you can look online and make your own out of, flour. It's like a flour paste. For the fact that it's so cheap, I don't know whether that's worth your time, but, it might be worth your pocketbook. So wheat paste can come either as little kids' school glue. It was the white paste that you may have played with when you were, in early elementary school. As wallpaper paste, do not get it if it says vinyl. It has to be cellulose. Cellulose is like plant starch. And so this plant starch makes the fibers of the paper or cardboard, recycled plants, stick together. And so this is really great. Sometimes you find it already pre-wet. What happens in its powdered form, wallpaper paste or wheat paste, is it kind of looks like clear jello, and you can add cold or warm water to it to your desired consistency. It works even better if you make it up the night before or keep a jar of it on hand, because it gets more and more viscous, that is fluid, as it goes for a day or two. Put it in the fridge because it's just like flour and water, so you don't want mold on it. If it dries up or gets too thick, you can add water to it to thin it out. Warm water works well. You can also have it kind of thick and dip a brush in hot water and kind of run it across the gel that you've made with this and then brush it off. So you can either make this very fluid or very gel-like. It's cheap, it lasts a long time. Whether you buy it in powdered form or already in a bottle like this with a brush on it, either way is good. I'm going to use the rubber cement today because I want to show you how useful this is. So one of the things you're going to want with the rubber cement is always go ahead and use a scratch sheet, and I'm going to tear a sheet of paper here. Should have done this earlier, but this can be like a paper bag or whatever. And what I'm going to do here is show you how useful this is. Okay, I've got a piece of foam core here that I want to put a piece of paper on for a box. And so what I'm going to do is take my rubber cement, kind of brush it off. You don't need big glops of it, especially if you're working with thinner paper, you want it thin. And I'm going to start in the middle. And the reason I'm going to start in the middle is I'm going to work out to the edges. Sometimes when you glue two pieces together, at the edge, you know, the glue kind of squishes out. Or you don't want a whole lot on the edge, but you definitely want the edges to get a thin coat of glue. So what I'm doing here is starting from the center, working out, and then going in all directions. It's okay if you have a little bit of gap in the glue, but you really don't want this thick at all. I have a glisten of this on my foam core, and when I look at it, actually, I can see where it's not glistening, and just put some more in there. But again, I'm using the excess and just brushing it into a different direction. Okay, now what's nice about this is I can let this dry. The longer I wait, no problem. So I can do, you know, all four sides of my box or all pieces of my prototype and have multiple pieces and just glue them all at once, assembly line, and set it aside. If you get any glue on your surface, clean it up right away, but don't toss the little rolls of cement that you'll get. Eventually, you can make a pickup eraser with the excess. They sell them, but here's what they are. You get to the point where you got a lot of rubber cement. I'm going to let that dry as I talk. And then at the end, I'll rub it, and you'll see I'll get like a little eraser. It's great. It will erase pencil lines if you accidentally get a pencil line where it's visible on your box. It will pick up excess rubber cement. There you go. Use a rubber cement pickup to clean up your paper. If you use your finger to kind of like rub off a glue spot, like, you know, a little rubber cement got on something and you want to rub it off, don't use your finger. It will pick up every little bit of dirt that's on your finger and put it into your project. Instead, make yourself one of these pickups that you're going to see me make and roll it on the spot that is dirty or has a fingerprint, and it will cleanly pick up the dirt. Okay, so now you saw me kind of go out of bounds. That's why I have this, so it doesn't get on my table. And you might be able to see it just glistens, and I can double check it, you know, look at it from the side, see if the glistening is, you know, consistent. So what's happening here is where I start rubbing this. For those of you who feel obsessive compulsive about such things, it's very fun. It's like a fidget almost. Okay, this paper, it's soaking in, but all I would be doing is rolling it like this, and I'll get something that looks like a kneaded eraser. So what I do now is, if this is wet and this is the only piece that has rubber cement on it, I can put paper on top of it, and it'll just come up like it's rubber, like it's a Post-it note. Even when it's dry, it will sometimes do that. So if I have this, nope, it's only going to do it when it's wet. So when it's dry, it's, you know, nothing's sticking to it. So you don't have that problem of sometimes when you go to glue something and all of a sudden you know, it slides and you can't line it up and the glue is everywhere. This, nothing will stick to it. It's tacky, but that's it. Now, here's a great little trick. If I take this liner piece of paper here and put it on top of this, I could just plop it down. I'd probably get some air bubbles or ripples in it, and I wouldn't be able to get them out, and my project would look really, really crummy. Well, here's a nifty trick. If you take a clean sheet of paper and you take your glued and dried, you know, it's been sitting there till you're ready to do it, put this sheet of paper here, it won't stick. Now, you know how on a computer image, when you line up a corner, you work with the corner of the edge, like to drag it out or to align it. Yeah, I want to do it this way. Sorry, there are two ways to do that. In this case, if this was my corner and I had to align it perfectly, I would put this here, and then I would put this pre-glued piece of paper on top of this, and I would perfectly line up that corner. Just like digitally, if I pull this corner, it kind of drags the shape out. If I pull this corner inside here, what will happen is that this will stick on the corner, and I can pull this out a little at a time. Let me show you what I mean with a previously glued one. It's just that this previously glued one is much larger than the foam core, so it's a little harder to see. Let me do it this way. So what I'm going to do here is this should be previously glued, and I'm going to glue this on top of it. And let's say I want to make it like really nicely centered. Make sure I have enough room. So when I press down on this, as I slowly go like this, if this wiggles a little bit, sorry, one way or the other, I can correct it. And when I press down here and pull it out a little at a time, I have plenty of time to like line it up. This is like really important when you have like the edges of a box where it has to, the top edge where it has to be clean or it looks terrible. Okay, so now this is stuck. Perfectly clean, perfectly smooth, and I have enough selvage or edge to wrap a panel. So let me show you how to do that and then what to do with the panel. So in this case, I want to fold this edge around to the back. This will be the inside of a box. The problem I have when I make a box, even if it's, sorry, let me get the one. Even if this is nice, if I tried to go in afterwards and, you know, slip panels into this box with glue, I would have a really hard time lining it because I wouldn't be able to see it very well. So what we want to do here is have really nice edges on the inside of the box and then construct the outside of the box. So what I have here is one panel that goes like this. These panels will be put together, in this case using pins. At the end, this panel of the floor will be set in. And you see I have an almost room-like model and an interior design. Often when you design a room, your foam core models will look more like this because you have a sense of two walls, but then you can also feel like you're, instead of looking into a box, you're like, you're standing in the room and looking at a corner. So, you know, if you're designing a room or something for an interior, that's something to think about with this. Anyway, on the inside of a box, see how it looks like the walls and the ceilings all match perfectly? That's where we're going. Okay, so to get there, I have this that's a lot wider. I'm going to be bringing these sides around, as you see here. However, here's what we want to do. You want to take a normally you would cut straight out here in order to fold this up. The problem is here, you know, when you try to get rid of this tab here, it often doesn't fit into the program. So what you want to do is, instead of cutting straight on that line, you want to cut in just a little bit. So I'm starting exactly at the corner and pulling in. If you're not good at finding exactly the corner and your craftsmanship isn't that great, take a push pin and put it right next to here and put that push pin right at the corner and your knife will recognize the push pin and kind of stop there. It puts the brakes on your knife. If you do not have a cutting mat, save some cardboard from something, some soft cardboard, or save a piece of styrofoam. It's great to cut on. Okay, poke holes on, sorry, not cut. Okay, notice that I am cutting away from I'm starting definitely at the corner, but cutting away a little bit so that when I fold these flaps down, I don't have a lot of bulk here at the corner. So it's not much of a line inwards, just slight, just enough to kind of avoid the other piece of paper. Now, I don't want to score this to fold it. Like, I could score it here and get the paper to bend better, but this right here, I want to keep this very, very clean. And so what I'm going to do here is this is painted, but this isn't. And so I need to take my rubber cement again and paint on the edges of the foam core. Don't forget that the edges of the foam core, where the foam is, they're going to need to have a little bit of glue on them too in order to keep a tight edge on it. And then again, just in the center, I'm going to put something else, a back on this. This is the inside of the box, so I'm going to have something on the outside of the box. So I already know that this foam core square will need to be pre-glued anyway, and while I'm doing the corners, I might as well, set it up. And I can wait a while on gluing the whole back, but this gets it ready for the flaps. Okay, so you really do kind of want to wait for things to dry a bit before you pull that around. So I wanted to, while that's drying, show you a few things. This is going to be for square corners, but you might want to create a box that has round corners. And so I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about doing that. Now, to begin with, I would have taken my phone, placed it on a surface, and very carefully scribed it. When we scribe something, you try to get a super sharp pencil. You know that you want, exactly this curvature and size because it's a very recognizable shape. And so I'm going to do this very quickly, just kind of as a model, so that you can see where I'm going with it. So I have a curve here, and that curve would be dealt with differently. Whenever you are using a knife, you should, whenever you are cutting something, you should always use a knife. And remember to position it so that your project is covered, because you will, if the ruler is on this side, you'll end up going like that and screwing it up, so protect that, protect your fingers. Don't expect to go through all at once. You're cutting the first layer through the foam and then separating it out. Now, when I see things like this curve, don't try to cut it out all at once. Don't do it with scissors. It will not work. What I'm doing here is I'm trimming it just a little bit on each of the sides. And I'll be real careful doing this. I'm doing this way too quickly because it's a demonstration. And then what I might do is just trim it just a little bit more to get a curve. So don't go for a curve at first. It's highly unlikely you'll get 4 perfect curves. But if you take a major triangle, the major kind of part of the curve, and then you round it off with your knife, you'll find that you're able to slice off little triangles much more accurately than little curves, right? So now the other thing you can do on this is I would definitely double check it if I wanted a perfect curve like this. And by that I mean I would, put it on my phone and do this. Now I should tell you guys too, you can use sandpaper or a nail file, and so if you just come in here with sandpaper or nail file, it will clean up the edges. The other thing that kind of works well, be careful with your knife, is the handle of your knife, because this can be burnished a little bit. That's what you call it when you take something smooth and rub it over it. So what I'm doing here is my cut is just a tiny bit chunky, and I might take a nail file and rub that down with a nail file, and then I'll come through here and just curve it like this, okay? Now, if you have something recognizable, like, you want to do a cell phone kind of number, You might not like the scale of that, and so, my samples all over the place. What I've done here is I've photocopied the phone, and I want to be able to enlarge it. Now, yes, I can enlarge it on my printer or in my computer, but let's say this is so large you need to get it even bigger, okay? As you know from enlarging photographs online, the best way to do it is to take the corner edge and, drag it to enlarge it, because then your proportions will be correct. Well, I could have this diagonal from the corner go on and on and on, right? Any horizontal or vertical that hits this line, that hits this diagonal evenly, like the edge of the paper, for instance, if I wanted to enlarge this phone, this, would be the enlargement. I mean, if you used a ruler, right? So I'm taking from the corner, I'm going like that. If I wanted it to be as big as this mat, I would just put this phone in the photocopy of it in the corner, draw a line all the way up to the edge of a big poster board or mat, and you'd have it. Well, in this case, what we're going to do is I want to put I photocopied this, and I want to put it on something curving. Now, normally I'm like, nah, don't use scissors, except for in this case, I'm going to have an edge, so I can use scissors because the edge will be hidden. Now, if this phone case was not just the size of the phone, but it had to be thicker, like a couple of layers for whatever reason, a curved box that was, taller than a phone, then what I would recommend is if you have, like, say, 3 pieces like this that you're stacking one on top of each other to make it more thick, right? Let's say I wanted it to be a jewelry box based on a cell phone. I don't know, I'm just making this up. I might consider that I want the inside of this cell phone box that I'm going to make to have maybe 1 or 2 pieces that are like this, with this cut out. In which case, I could have a base that was solid, 2 or 3 rings that were cut from this, and then a top that would go on top of it that would be, hinged to open the box to show whatever, okay? That's just random stuff, right? So what I want to do here is I want to leave enough room on my seam allowance so that when this goes down on the side of the box, it might go down far enough to accommodate some of that thickness. In this case, I'm just going to do this like it's a lid phone single, okay? So in this case, I'm going to put this on here, and I have these curves. I don't think I need a seam allowance quite that big. That was just to show you if it was multiple. So let me just trim this quickly to give you the idea more easily. Okay, so just as I have to cut away on a corner like I did here, the problem with this is that this is bigger than this, so when you try to fold it under, there's more bulk for you, and you don't really want to cut a wedge out because you'll get some gapping here. So what you want to do is the last place that it goes straight, put a cut and bring it almost up to the edge, like as much as you can, and then go to the last place that line was straight here and cut it almost to the edge, like as close as you can. I would probably use a X-Acto knife with this. Now this is called grading, and so what you do, it's like grading a road. You kind of put a curve on it. I'm going to go to the first diagonal I see there and make a trim there, and then I'm going to come in here and make a series of cuts, and it depends on how tight the curve is. Like if it's not a big curve, you might be able to get like a cut here, a cut here. I would not even bother to do this on just these two, because when this folds over, the diagonal doesn't match the curve, And just like I cut the curving edges where I took some diagonals off, some small triangular shapes off, what's going to happen here is when I trim it down to a smaller angle and a smaller angle, it'll work much better. I'm not going to do the whole thing because I think you see what we're doing here. So what's happening here is I want to, first of all, come in here and give myself a kind of marks where the top will be glued to the image so that I can see it a little bit better. I'm going to do this for you guys in Sharpie. I would not do that in my studio just so that you can see it's way too light. Okay, so these are called registration marks. You want it to register correctly. So I'm going to now take this and I'm going to glue it. And while this glue is drying, I'm going to show you about pulling the other edges together and putting it together on a box. So I'm working from the inside out. And if this wasn't just a demonstration, I would go from the inside out this way, inside out this way, and double check it. Likewise on this. Now, on thinner paper, it's a pain to clean up rubber cement. So what I would suggest doing is just getting a piece of scratch paper, and then you can easily go from center out, and you don't have to worry about the edges of glue trashing up your pattern later. One of the things that can happen with rubber cement if you're not careful and don't use a scratch pad is you might get a little streak of it on your working surface, and if that streak attaches to your project pieces, it will help pick up dirt, as I mentioned, and then you'll be really upset because you got a smudge on your project that you've been working on. Okay, slightly set that aside. I'm coming back here, and you can see here that I can just really rub that well, and I'm pulling it in with some pressure. Now you can also get a nice crease if your paper is resisting you by burnishing it again. So I'm pulling this down. You can see my fingerprints. I would wash my hands before doing this. I'm going to pull on this one, make sure it lays down, and you can see it's just kind of sticking to it really nicely. There is no bubbling. It's like you bought the box with this pattern on it. Okay, now right here I'm seeing that these stick up, and every once in a while you might have to come back in and get one of those corners. Go ahead and do it. Like you might be covering the corner with another skin, but these places don't have the glue on it, and if that corner pulls on something else or fails to stick, it can be a headache later on. So I'm going to have to let that dry for that to work. This is probably dry now, and what I can do now is I'm going to move a few things, set this down, see if I have some scratch paper without glue on it. There we go. Remembering to use my scratch paper here, I'm going to find my registration marks, register it perfectly on both sides this time, and then pull this out and move it a little at a time to make sure I've got that perfect. Once again, just like I did here, I'm going to have to glue the sides and back. I have a little place here that dribbled on my mat. If you get a place that dribbles on your mat, don't try to clean it up when it's wet. It will just smear all over the mat and create more work that's harder to see later. Let the glop, the drip, the blob of rubber cement, just let it dry, and then when you roll it, it will roll right off. Be careful on wood finishes. It does have a little bit of a solvent in it. Like Formica or paper bag or cardboard surfaces, you'll be okay. Alright, so this is dried now on this one, and I just stuck my finger in it. So now what I'm going to do here, I'll let these dry, and you understand, of course, this is a demonstration, so I'm not spending a huge amount of time on this. Let's see. I know that on this piece here, I'm going to be putting a skin on the outside of the box. So this is scrapbook paper that I used here. I am using a log cabin. That is, I am not putting these two pieces on the front. If this goes on the front, this goes to the back. And so I'm going to take that, line it up. Because I'm going to put another piece on top of this to cover it, a top skin, I don't have to glue these joints because the top skin will hold it together, and that keeps the joints a whole lot cleaner. If you have, you can use fabric, you can use scrapbook paper, you can use, anything you can figure out. There we go. Sometimes when you add a couple of layers, it's really hard to get these straight pins in here. It wants to resist you. Rather than hurting your fingers, take a push pin or a small finishing nail and at least start the hole. If it's a really big object, your pin, bigger than your pin, the hole's too big, the pin's not going to stick, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I am watching that my fingers don't get stabbed by a straight pin and forget to go out of camera. So for instance here, this is really resisting me. In this case, I'd find my straight pin in all of this mess. But for now, I'm just going to put it where there's not so much bulk because of the edge. But boy, that little sucker is a tight one. All right, I guess I will have to follow my own advice. Oh, where's my push pin? I will use this then. You just have to get. Doesn't it always happen in a demonstration that stuff like that happens? That was stupid for me to do that with a knife anyway. Should have had a push pin. Okay, I'm going to push this in here. There we go. Now I got it going. As I am putting this box together, I'm not going to spend time with that on the demonstration. As I'm putting this box together, one of the things that I'm doing is pinning these together, and then I have a base here. When you are putting the base on, let's say I have glued these, I have pinned these together. Since the push pin has gotten buried in what I'm doing here, let me see if I can tag it together for y'all. I guess I could tape it, but then it's going to flop around. Not worth it. So, if this wasn't a demonstration, I would definitely be going out and getting a push pin for this instead of fighting with it like this. Okay, there we go. That'll at least hold it in place a little bit, and then this will hold it in place. Gotta double check it to make sure that I am putting it in the right place. There we go. Pinning it one step at a time each way around will prevent this corkscrewing that you're seeing with me, because I'm not, adequately attaching my parts together as we go. It's too much of a rush to show you the next thing, make the video shorter. Okay, there we go. And then this one goes in here. And this one, it's like a visual puzzle, huh? This one. Okay, well, I'm not going to spend too much time on perfecting the demo. I have this bottom here. When I put this bottom in this perfectly square box that it would be, it should fit without any gapping showing on there. Let me see if I can get that. Yeah, you wouldn't have any gapping. But one thing that I have done, despite not having a push pin, is I've made sure that when I put this the bottom on, that I understood that on all four sides I was going to have a buildup of foam core. So the interior size of the floor is not the same as the exterior size, right? So be sure to compensate for the number of foam core pieces that are around this. And so what you would have here would be a box where you had you can use your imagination. Doesn't have to be perfect, right? Here you go, kids. Okay, where the inside of the box would be nice and clean, no gapping, well pinned, and ready to take on the outside. Now, as for the outside, I'm going to have to pull this apart anyway to show you the outside. I'm going to put this outside on here, but first, let's get back to this. Sorry. So what I'm going to do here is pull up very, very tightly on the So that's going to be the one that doesn't work out. I didn't grade that. Okay, I'm going to pull up very tightly on one of the lengths. I'm going to pull up very tightly on this length. And that really establishes, you know, the main part of what I've got. And then I'll just one at a time pull these angles in, these triangles in, just one after another. And you'll find that they fold really nicely over that edge. Now again, you may have to use your rubber cement here to get these to stay down because they might not be, you know, glued underneath. In this case, since it's a demonstration and I can't stick my arms in front of me, talk to you, and hover over the artwork to get it just right. Here we go. I'm just going to tape it there. Don't do that because eventually the tape will come up on your project and it'll, you know, warp the project. Now, on this one, oops, meant to do this, didn't I? Okay, there you go. And then I have this one here. I have a little bit of a bump here on the edges, and so I think you could perfect that when you worked on it. But I'm just going to take this X-Acto knife. You can use the back of a spoon if you want. And I'm just going to burnish it flat. And you'll see that that's nice and tight. Here, where I didn't grade the seams, see I've got this excess, and it won't matter how much I wad the excess up, it's just going to look all crunched on the edges. So you don't need to do that. So whether it's curved or straight, we've got it ready to go now. Now, what I've done somewhere here, had pre-cut for you until I started moving things around. Let's see. I will be putting, a second, oh jeez, I work in very small quarters, and so I probably won't even edit that out, just to let you see. Let me, I don't know where, I had pre-cut sheets for you guys, and I have no idea where they migrated to in the course of this video, so I will have to improvise, I guess. When you are working with a piece like this, where I want to, this box is completed, not just a corner, and let's say I know that I want to wrap a wood grain around this, and I want this wood grain to come right to the edge perfectly. But if I wrap it around the edge like this, it's likely to gap and not fit perfectly when you get to this edge, because you might have a very slight variance in the level of it. And so it's not a good idea to try to wrap multiple surfaces at once if you can avoid it. It's much better to kind of take this approach. And what I mean by that is I'm going to play the game of let's pretend that this is straight. And here we go. And let's pretend I'm doing this with a ruler, but I'm just going to do it quickly so that you don't get tired of the video. All right. What I've now done is I'm going to line this here, but this is nothing more than a tab, okay? And so since this is going to be just a tab, and I think what I'll do for purposes of this demonstration, depends on the design, is let's make this into a tab on this side and this into a tab on this side. Now, I would have pre-measured this, not done it by folding this. This is just to make it quicken the demo. So do as I say, not as I do, right? So I have already ascertained by measuring that this will wrap around one of those panels and that this will be the floor. If I have that in my design, let's see. I had a double fold there. Okay, if I do this, then I'm going to once again, as I did on the interior of the box, cut away the corner. Or if this was a curve, grade the seam. Any curve, you should grade the seam. The tighter the curve, the more little cuts you have to make. Okay, I would put this on a piece of paper here. Starting from the center out, brush out. Now, because this is a demonstration, I mean, you get the idea now of that gluing, right? So I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about, you know, showing you how to glue right. In this demonstration, I'm doing a lot of stuff just to move on once you understand the concept, right? So take your time and glue, don't glue like that. All right, now what I can do is by taking a scratch sheet of paper that would cover the whole place. That would have covered, I'm sorry, a scratch sheet of paper that would cover the whole panel. Then I would take this, and I would super carefully put this down one little bit at a time. And once I got that one little bit to stick here, really straight along that edge, I would pull this paper out, and I would really look to make this edge like, you know, you can get it machine perfect. I mean, we're human beings, but having that like perfect edge is really nice. More amazing that we can get that perfect edge. Okay, I have to adjust this because it was poorly cut. I would remove the piece of paper, do this, get my edges here, fold this down here. And you can see I'm already getting a nice clean edge. This bottom edge would be part of this, right? So I'm going to put this here so that you can see it a bit better. That's the bottom of the box. It's folding on the bottom of the box. The bottom of the box. Now, as things come around the bottom of the box, if I did this on two sides, so two sides have these flap wings to cover the corners, that means that in this case, all four corners have kind of a protective edge going on. Once I finish this, I would then take a perfectly cut square for the bottom and glue the bottom on so that when these two came together, you know, it would be pretty much seamless, which is the point of the next move. When you get this done so that you have this nice edge going on, if you then have, hold on, let me get this prepped. If you then have another edge here, these two edges will be perfectly like lined up, right? And so you have the edge there in case you have any gapping. But then, so that this stays straight, you have another piece of paper, the right size, the correct size, that goes like this. And when it lines up here, this sheet is so much easier to line up here, and you can still line it up to the corner, but you don't have to be exact. If there's any gapping on the corner, it won't show up with the rubber cement. Now, you still have to be careful. It's not like you can just slop it together, but you can get a really nice professional looking edge if you do that. Now, I would then have cut this correctly to size before beginning, planned that there would be another sheet of paper here with this flap on it, the other side. And then, so when I cut this piece of paper to go on top, this edge is perfect. It's not a funky crease, it's not scotch tape. It is lined up so that when you put the top on top of it, it lines up perfectly with the edge. Now, plan ahead, because where this goes to the bottom here, it would still need a bottom flap like this so that the bottom edge looked as good as the top edge. All right, now you can get really nice perfect edges like this, and I will be showing you later some artwork I've done like this, but this is a curved sheet that has to fit into a form. And you can see here that it has graded edges, and then I just put a panel on the back, and these two form part of a cabinet of curiosities. They're bookends for it, so to speak. So, you know, you can get this so it's perfectly smooth and backed. If you have a curving piece of foam core such as this, that we demonstrated before by just taking a knife, you're slicing on one side of the foam core, then you're slicing on the other side of the foam core. What I did here was I just real roughly did a prototype top, so that if you had something sculptural or a box or a musical instrument, you know, you could see how this curve works. So to make the curve stay in one place, I just put in a little prototype bottom. Now here's the problem here. If you put something covering this, these ridges are going to show up, like create dimples for you. So what you want to do in that case is go ahead and put your rubber cement on here, let it dry, put your rubber cement on a strip of pretty heavy duty paper, and then I would take this and I would have this go here and here and here, and by using that same technique of sliding a clean paper underneath it, you see here you'll have like a really much better surface to glue things on. Now depending on how this worked, I would be highly tempted to cut a sheet that was wide enough here so that when this fit together that you could still overhang. I might pin this into place on the edge here and then take my knife and go, you know, if I have to roll this, I'm going to have to grade that curve. So I might come in here and just in between the lines that I made with my knife before, I might make some marks like this so that when I glue the two pieces together, I've got a graded seam so that this raw edge here, the foam core, is covered up by this interim piece of paper, you know, that works as a buffer. So you could even get rid of this. So what you do here is, whether you grade it or not, depending on your pre-planning, you can then take another sheet of paper, put your rubber cement on it, use the technique I showed you about having a dry sheet of, you know, scratch paper to use. And then on this piece, this wood grain, not at the dollar store by the roll, teaching supplies, which it is, okay. This wood grain or fabric or other paper would be stuck to this perfectly. I could then turn it over, grade this seam by cutting. I would have to cut it here and then cut it here to get the tabs to lay flat. Once the tabs laid flat, as on this curved piece, I would cut a sheet to cover those tabs. In this case, it needed a border around it. In the case of something like this with a box, by the time I had something like this and it was graded, I would expect that box top to come exactly to the edge. That is the pattern piece you see here, that's the insert top with red on it. That would fit perfectly on here. If this is an open box, you want to do your pre-planning, because if this had an opening, I would want this graded seam to come around the edge when I open the box, meaning I would have to do the lining second. So this would require a little bit of thinking. One of the things that's nice about working this way, though, is that you can make your prototypes in parts and then see the different ways your parts can go together without putting any glue on it. You know, you can do a trial run. And then once you have the, you know, glue on it, then you can kind of work it. When you first put the glue on, when it's wet, it'll act like a Post-it note glue, so you kind of tack things together. But, you know, to me, by then you ought to have figured out where all your joints are and how things work better. Okay, I think we covered a lot in this. I think some of you probably got some great ideas. I do expect your craftsmanship to be, you know, on point, real fleck, as they used to say. Fleek, fleek. See, I don't even know. And I want you to please go ahead and put these together, okay? So, skins, I need you to do a prototype of them just for your kind of studio lab notes. And I hope you can apply this information to your current project. You will definitely need to know how to do this for your next project. All right, thumbs up, have fun.